Yes, you should. Let me go ahead and go live. But I'm gonna, I have,
Should I add here to let people know?
yes, you should. Go ahead and add here. Yes, you should. Hi, everybody.
And hey, everyone. I'm Deborah Sempier. I'm the CEO of Althea. I'm here with Justin Kilpatrick, CTO and co-founder. And I'm Deborah Sempier. I'm the CEO of Althea.
Sorry.
Justin Kilpatrick.
Really high production values for these streams.
My bad. Sorry. My fault.
It's okay.
Thanks for your patience all with the technical difficulties there. So again, Deborah Sempier, Justin Kilpatrick, and then we're introducing the newest member of the Alfia team, which is Stephen Shoemaker, live on the network launch date of the Svensson Network in Oregon. He's also like gonna give us a demo of splicing cable as well. Watch the master.
Our favorite.
But he's also coming on board as a project coordinator for Althea to help y'all get started with your networks and be there to help us coordinate all of those little pieces that go into planning and coordinating and budgeting, and then eventually deploying networks. So really excited to have you all with us today. I know it's been a while since we've done one of these, so thanks everyone for joining us. And of course, this will be recorded and available later as well. I'm going to give you all just a few updates on what's going on from the deployment and network side of things. And then Justin's going to tell us what's been happening behind the scenes with the blockchain. And then I'll let Stephen have a chance to introduce himself. And then we'll get into the meat of all of these great questions that y'all sent to us through the sign up form. And then, and of course, please do, if you have more questions or you have comments, we have the chat, we'll have that open and be looking at that frequently. So please ask questions there as you have them. So since the kind of last time we've all chatted in this format, a lot has been really happening on the networking side of things. And we formed some really amazing strategic partnerships with universities. The University of Washington and our nonprofit network, Tacoma Cooperative Network, are working very hard. They're in the Hilltop area of Tacoma to deploy Althea over LTE. And it's very exciting to me that we can go not only and have all of our amazing price-aware routing protocol and the pay-for-forward automatic billing all the way down, not only to the fixed wireless home, but down to the device level. And as you, actually, if you can see, that's a University of Washington SIM card that we're using there at that network in Tacoma. So really exciting stuff happening there. There's a great team, and excited to bring that real distributed LTE to the users there. In other news too, we've been exploring, but have not yet deployed our very first fiber networks. But we've been working very closely on planning that with a strategic partner called Net Equity. They've been great. Actually, I've known the founder, Alfia, for years. So it's very exciting for us to be able to kind of move into a full deployment of that and make user-owned fiber networks a reality. A lot of the way that we think about fiber networks seems very inaccessible, right? Like it's a very different thing than the work that we're doing right now with fixed wireless. But that really, in fact, is not the case. You know, we're really just looking at a piece of glass and the work that we're doing right now. But the way that our networks are configured now, users own their hardware and earn revenue for hosting, you know, antennas. There we go. Yeah, there's your fiber. Thanks for the demonstration. And so for instead of paying $200, let's say, for hosting an antenna and earning revenue, users can then host, pay $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 for a fiber strand to your home that you own, that then you can also, utilize by hanging antennas, perhaps LTE antennas, and then, earn revenue for hosting and forwarding that capacity of bandwidth. So really exciting things coming down the pipeline. We've also really spent this last year proving out a lot of the deployment processes. And I think Stephen can speak a little bit more to that and the topology of his network. Many of our networks have redundant backhaul, fiber backhaul. So if one of the points of fiber interconnection goes down, the whole network seamlessly fails over to the other piece of it. We also just recently built a network down in Southeast Oregon using an off-grid. And that network's really interesting. I would say it's about 35 linear miles from the north point to the south point of that network. And currently serves about 50 households, which is, and I think when it's all, said and done, we'll have about 60 or 70, but that's really probably 98% of the households in that area across that just really diverse topology. So I think that's what was really kind of exciting build out, and happy to see that one, get wrapped up and done, and looking forward to some of our new work. But I will leave it over to Justin now to talk about what's been happening with blockchain and why that's exciting.
Yeah, so over the past couple of months, getting the Althea blockchain started has really sort of eaten up all the development air in the room. Now, how should I put it? I actually want to stop and appreciate for a moment that it can, because that's a lot of what we've done over the last year, is really stabilize Althea and make it an operational system. So while Deborah and Stephen are out there deploying hundreds more users for us, the Althea software has been chugging along, expanding, and doing what it's intended to do. Very nicely. It doesn't take a lot of attention to keep running, and it's really been working out very nicely. Now, sort of the next steps for Althea are to get the Althea blockchain up and running, and the reasoning for the Althea blockchain is pretty straightforward. When it comes to user-to-user micropayments, Althea is essentially the in-production king. And by that, I mean that it's too expensive to do micropayments on Ethereum. It's too expensive to do them on most other chains. We currently have user funds in DAI on the XDAI blockchain, of which we are 70% of their non-contract call traffic, so aka DAI microtransactions. So yeah, we are it as far as high volume microtransactions, and we need a blockchain that we can sort of scale this operation on, and one that's operated by people who really care about the stability of the network, because XDAI works pretty well, but they're mostly focused on trading more, how should I put it, more DeFi stuff than infrastructure. And we need an infrastructure blockchain, something that is deeply reliable and can take us to millions of users, and a place where we can say, like, hey, this is a microtransaction from a router. It's going to get through in this deterministic amount of time. And it's also sort of a point for the Althea community. The transaction fees generated by the Althea blockchain will go into not only paying to keep the blockchain online, but also into community funds, community tokens that will be used to help maintain what I'm calling Althea Open Core, which is really the next step of the Althea software. So this is all very interconnected, and I'm trying not to ramble too much while I explain it. But Althea Open Core is really where we're going with the Althea router firmware and the software itself, where we take the time to say, okay, Althea is not just a proof of concept anymore. It's a real working product, and we have to start to consider building an open source community around it, getting funding, and maintaining sort of a non-profit development organization to keep the core of Althea open and sort of support ISPs taking it and deploying it in the real world. So all of our network operators are currently very small ISPs. But we also envision a future where larger ISPs may consume and interact with Althea networks, may consume the Althea software and interact with Althea networks. So the Althea blockchain is just the path forward in that it lets us scale things up, and it also lets us fund sort of the future of the open core of Althea, and sort of begins the path of, how should I put it? Us, Deborah, me, our sort of company becomes a smaller thing than the larger Althea community, which is what's been happening all the time. More and more people are doing networks. Every day I get 3 or 4 messages from different people that are like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I'm just like, oh, there's so much going on now. And that's sort of how we plan to support and help move that forward as Althea grows to be a bigger thing. Now that I've done the whole pitch, we can get into some of the details. So right now, what we're working on is a bridge between Ethereum and the Althea blockchain, which is a generic bridge between Ethereum and Cosmos-based blockchains we call Gravity. And that's going to allow us to have users just send Ethereum to their routers, and it magically shows up on the Althea blockchain as DAI that they can use to buy bandwidth. And this is really important to us because we need a stablecoin, and DAI is the most decentralized available choice if we don't want to launch a stablecoin in addition to a blockchain, and that sounds like a lot more work. So that's really the immediate plan. We're hoping to have the first proper Althea blockchain testnet, rather than just bridge testnet, out by the middle or later next month, and we really want to have production Althea blockchain in March. And I think that's an achievable goal. We'll see, may slip a little, like anything, but I really think we can get it out the door.
Yeah, stay tuned. All right, Stephen, I wanted to take an opportunity for you to introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about what you're doing there, and then also kind of how you can be helpful, or what your role is here with Althea.
Yeah, sure thing. So my name's Stephen. I've kind of come from a background of general IT. I've been doing IT work for 10 years or so, and my favorite part of all of that was kind of the networking side, especially. So I've done a lot of small business networking, and kind of in the later years of that, gone into Wi-Fi meshes and that kind of thing. So I already had some familiarity with mesh networks and just general networking, and it's always way more fun than troubleshooting printers. And so when I kind of really, what triggered all this for me was actually the pandemic starting, and my billable hours just dropped dramatically. And so I was looking for something else I could do to use my skills to be useful in all of this, and decided that starting an ISP was kind of the thing to do. So my first introduction to all this was starting my own ISP in my neighborhood where I live, using Althea as the platform for that. And kind of through that, seeing how it all worked, seeing how to actually get it started, and how kind of efficient and affordable it was to get started. I mean, I was just pretty blown away, and it really went of course there's always going to be hiccups here and there, but it just went so smoothly compared to anything else I've done. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started other businesses before, and I've never had one go this easily, which not gonna lie. So that I just really kind of from an early point realized that the Althea platform just makes a lot of sense, and it works really, really well. Having managed businesses networks for years, I know all the kinds of things that go wrong with them, and so seeing this network work on a neighborhood scale, and seeing it be so resilient and get through all of these bumps and things, and come back automatically and all that stuff. I mean, the simple thing that the routers automatically reboot themselves after 10 minutes if they go down, that saves hours and hours of your time and your stress. It's amazing. So there's just all these little things like that that just make the system work so well. So anyway, so I was impressed, and kind of immediately, said like, yes, I'm all in. Let's kind of keep building this and expanding this and all that. And then over the course of the past 10 months or so, I think it's been, just got to know Deborah and Justin, for the rest of the crew more, and so now I've kind of come on as a as an actual part of the core Althea team, and I'm hoping that my role will be to kind of help all of this scale up, help other networks get started, and my favorite thing really is the hardware, playing with all this. So like what I'm actually doing right now is standing in this freezing cold closet, building this this network cabinet that you see behind me here. And yes, I brought my own space heater because it's an unheated building, and otherwise my fingers wouldn't work. So I just really love doing this, like building this stuff. And the way that Althea is hardware agnostic and lets you play with all these different bits of hardware, the routers and the radios and the or fiber or whatever it is that you're using, like to me that's really exciting, to not be locked into one system or another system or whatever. So yeah, I just figured that like my role is to kind of help people get their network started, from a hardware side, a technical side. I think that I have some abilities in just the general customer service side as well, which is always going to be a stopping point of any new network. But yeah, in general, I think that I'm just really excited to be part of this whole thing. I mean, it's definitely the most kind of exciting thing I've done in quite a while. Like I said, I'm not missing troubleshooting printers one bit. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely the most kind of.
Yeah, no, I think that's just like really inspiring, and this is the second gateway that you've lit up. I mean, the first network that you built out in the first network for like 35 or 36 homes was within like probably 6 or 8 weeks or something like that. The bulk of that got put out. So just seeing what is possible, with the proper planning and bring that all together. And I also think that, I think your story of, being able to build it out quickly and get ROI quickly is exciting, and reproducible. And I'm so excited that you will be the one to help other operators, get started on their networks. Because you've been there, you've done that, how the community outreach goes, the pain points and all of that part. So really just like so excited to have you as part of the team. Actually that kind of leads into our first question, which is what does an operator do in layman's terms? So we use this terminology, a network operator, for the kind of entity or person or small business, nonprofit, cooperative that is curating and managing the network, which is different than an infrastructure provider. So that could be, a relay that's got an extra antenna, or it could be an infrastructure provider, could be, your backhaul or other different pieces. That one of the kind of main principles of the Althea system is it decouples those two roles. So, yeah, I mean, do you want to, Stephen, give us a little bit of a day in the life of an Althea network operator? Yeah,
definitely. So let's see, your day starts at about 3 a.m. No, I'm kidding. So once in a while it does. I think it really depends on kind of what stage you're at. So I'll talk about like the early stages. Let's say you're within the first, month or two of your network going live. So a lot of your time is going to be spent just kind of doing outreach and spreading the word and like talking to people and making sure they understand what it is that you're building, what it is that you're trying to do for the community. And vast majority of the time, like once people understand, oh, this is an alternative to whatever your DSL or whatever your terrible thing there is, then they're like, oh, well, yeah, of course you want that. Great, sign me up right away, right? But there's definitely going to be people, that just maybe they just don't understand what the internet is in the first place, and so there's going to have to be a little bit of education there, and from time to time. So and then also, like when you do actually get people online, you still may need to help train them on how their devices are going to use Althea to connect to the internet, help them connect their smart TV and stuff like that, right? So there's always going to be some of that aspect. In terms of like what you're actually building in terms of the infrastructure, for the most part, I kind of like to work from a very short list of hardware. So like in my entire network, I think there's only 5 different types of radios and there's two types of radios, or sorry, three different types of routers, right? So it's a very small amount of different types of things that we're doing. And the benefit there being, it's easy to have spares on hand, it's easy to troubleshoot things because you're used to working with this particular stuff over and over. That said, Althea is hardware agnostic, and so you really can experiment with all kinds of different stuff. There's tons of other brands and stuff out there I haven't used yet, but you can. So yeah, in terms of like when you're getting started, a lot of what you're doing really is just the legwork of talking to people in your community and figuring out where you're going to put stuff. When you're getting to the point of actually doing physical installations, like that's the fun part, in my opinion at least, of actually building the thing that does the thing. And, and then when people see it turn on and you do a speed test and all that, everyone's real happy. So that's, but I would say that when you first start, your time kind of skews more heavily on the community building side of it, depending on how you're doing it. So as it matures a bit and you're getting into, like, let's say the 6-month mark to the 9-month mark, something in that, and you're just kind of running the network, like you're still building it out probably. But in my case, at least, my first couple months I felt were just like a dead sprint to hit my break-even point, to where I wasn't actively losing money every month on my backhaul payments. And I was able to hit that point in about 2.5 months, which is very, very fast. And so I don't want to paint an unrealistic picture here, right? I was able to do that because I had a lot of time on my hands. We have other network operators who are working a full-time job and doing this on the side. Obviously, they have a lot less time to put into this, right? So you have to kind of have your own realistic expectations for yourself and your market and that kind of thing.
One thing I just wanted to add to that, I think that's a really important point, Stephen. And one thing that we've seen operators do in the past too is partner up for this, community role and, kind of technical building piece. So sometimes folks are better at the community building, and then you bring in like a technical partner or like a contractor to do the actual build out, or vice versa. So that's kind of be one way you can think about kind of hacking those two kind of roles into one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like in my network, I ended up doing the majority of both of those things myself, but we did actually have some help with community outreach. Like we had people that just volunteered to go hand out flyers for us and stuff like that. So you definitely will find that there are people, these kind of like evangelists of your cause in your neighborhood. So in terms of like once the network is kind of up and stable, you hit your break even point, you're profitable. Then it's just kind of about growth. And you can either just let it grow organically, basically like let people come to you. The word will spread, people talk about it. And that's definitely, the word of mouth, of course, is the best form of marketing in any business. And so that's great. But you also may want to be a bit more aggressive and do your own marketing and your own outreach and that kind of stuff. And you can do that too. In terms of like actually maintaining the network, like keeping what you've already built running, I gotta say it's just pretty darn easy. Like Althea tools, it just does a really good job of kind of summing things up. And vast majority of things, like I call it self-healing, because it's when certain things break, most of the time, and I mean this is not just with networking, this is just IT in general, like most of the time rebooting things fixes it, right? And so when a lot of times when something breaks, you reboot it and it fixes it. And then you look into it and try to figure out why it broke, right? That's important. But in terms of like getting people back online, it's generally pretty quick. And so I would say the amount of time that I spend on a typical day now in terms of like maintenance of keeping my network running is, I don't know, probably less than 30 minutes, less than 15 minutes most days. It's really not much. And that's, to me, that's what attracted to me this in the first place, because I've run countless networks in the past that were, much, much less stable than that, much worse than that. So to me, that's like a really compelling point for somebody in terms of being the network operator, being the owner of the business. Like it's, once you get it up and built, it just kind of runs. You don't really have to do that much to keep it going. So probably you're going to put more time into growth, whatever your expansion plans are, that kind of thing. That's going to eat up more of your time than the actual tech side.
Yeah, I think that's the salient point. Time to build, but then maintenance is pretty low. I do want to get to some of our other questions that we have here. I'm going to give this one here to Justin. I think this kind of speaks a little bit more about the open core, and I think you can talk a little bit about that. Someone was asking about adding an application to the Althea dashboard. What does that look like? Is that something that would be possible? And I think maybe that also speaks to some of the other contributions or, edits or changes that people might want to make. So Justin, let us know.
So, how should I put it? When we first went to make, so when we were first working on Alfia, the big question is this buildable? Can we build it? And how do we get it all working and something that looks good and works well to the user? Well, we're past that point now, and that's why I'm talking a lot about Althea Open Core, because everybody asks questions like, what if I want to do this custom thing? What if I want to do that custom thing? And so now we have to deal with the how should I put it? The not so fun parts of success, and that we have to deal with becoming a library. So the Alfia router software is pretty tightly integrated into one package, and it's not really designed for a bunch of people at the moment. It's not really designed for a bunch of people to come in and be like, oh, I want to do this custom dashboard or this custom feature or that custom feature. And it's very important for the larger Althea community that we reach that point. And so Althea, so when I talk about Althea Open Core, I'm talking about a sort of rearranging of the existing Althea software such that it is easier to consume downstream and do those sorts of things, so that there can be, the Althea firmware release, and then maybe there is X version of the Althea firmware, Y version, Z version. Everybody has their own thing they want to add, and they can do it. And I want to make that easy and easy to consume, easy to keep stable. And that is actually the biggest thing that sort of the reason why I'm not pointing everybody to a GitHub repo when I say Althea Open Core, because the good thing is that we have stable software. But rearranging stable software is something that has to be done with delicacy, especially for networking software, because everybody, you plug it in and you expect it to work, and if it doesn't work, you don't get an error message. It's just like, oh, what happened? It's really mysterious.
Sorry, Justin, your mic. Bring your mic down.
Oh, you can't hear me right now?
Just bring your mic down to your face.
Okay, sorry about that. Anyways, so that's sort of what we're working on. We're hoping to make that possible. I think that we'll have a really good system for that ready by around the middle of this year. Like I said earlier, the sort of like I said earlier, the blockchain is sort of eating up all the air in the room when it comes to development work right now. So we got to get that out the door, and then it's Althea Open Core, which rhymes, and that's great.
Yeah, I think another follow-on question is that someone had asked concerns about, Chinese having backdoors and making the network vulnerable in the hardware. And, there's some other questions about like supported hardware and using your own equipment. And, maybe you could kind of talk about the ethos and, what is Althea supported hardware, what that all looks like, and kind of the larger context. I think we'll get all of these like smaller questions in that framework.
So, two things to really keep track of is that Althea is a hardware platform, meaning that we have how should I put it? So, meaning that we install our own software, the whole operating system, onto commodity hardware, and this is great because it lets us support any device. And it's also great in that in that we control the whole operating system. So there are no software backdoors in Althea, and I know that because I build every piece of software that goes on the device, except for the potential for hardware backdoors and firmware backdoors, and that's all a whole different topic. But anyways, I build the whole operating system, and as much software as we could possibly build is all built sort of right down here on my desktop. So this is really what provides a lot of the flexibility that Althea has, and what lets us do things that traditional ISPs can't, is this sort of full stack control of the environment is how we can make such an easy to use plug and play system. because when something bothers us, we can just go and change it. It's not somewhere else on an appliance we didn't build or an appliance we didn't control. And that's really how networking software has been made for a really long time. It's been a bunch of appliances you string together by standards. And interoperability is great, but there's a lot to be said for reimagining the whole thing at once. Sort of coming in and saying, hey, what if we wanted to make an ISP package? What if we wanted to rethink a lot of things at the same time and make it work together very easily? And that is sort of what you get with Althea. So I've gone on this long tangent to tell you that the software on Althea routers is very secure and more up to date than just about anything else. Because the average, the average home router or piece of soft or like networking appliance is updated every several years. I rebuild Althea with the latest bug fixes and vulnerability fixes about every 2 or 3 months. We push out a new release.
Yeah, and I think Justin talked a little bit about the being hardware agnostic, and so basically what that means is that we do that our software lives on the router, right? And typically we have a variety of consumer routers and x86 firmware and other things that you can use to build a network with. But then the medium of transport, so whether that's fiber or coax or Ethernet or fixed wireless or soon LTE, is agnostic and whatever works best for the environment and throughput needs that you have in your community. So when you kind of get started with your network, a lot of people ask, is there something simple that we can start with, or a demonstration, or can I use things that I have? We have a supported firmware list of routers at althea.net/firmware, where you can grab something from Amazon, or maybe you have it at home. I know I certainly seem to have a ever-growing stash of routers and totes that I back from the old blue and black links. This is the WIRT 54Gs. Is that what those were when you used to make mesh networks? Yeah. So maybe you have some of these routers in your stash, or maybe you want to grab those on Amazon. Or we also have a kit at buy.althea.net. We call it a mini mesh kit. It's a few configured radios and routers that are pre-flashed with the Althea firmware. So it's easy, just kind of set that up, scope it out, take a look there. And while you're there, there is a t-shirt, and then this new t-shirt is going to be there soon. Let's see if I can get the back. Althea, yeah, there you go. So if you want to represent while you're there buying your mini mesh kit, you can also buy your super cool Althea t-shirt as well, or just grab a router from your stash and flash it. Okay, so let's move on in the questions here. There's some asking for some advice on getting started for Scratch, and then also on finding backhaul connections. So I'm gonna give a little framework to that, and then Stephen, maybe you can add some color to that community outreach and getting started piece of that. As far as finding backhaul, that can be one of the more challenging things and is the most important thing. But basically, a network is made up of reselling bandwidth. So getting that wholesale bandwidth at an affordable rate in the right spot is absolutely critical. But it can be difficult because a lot of fiber networks are hidden behind proprietary KMZ files, and just isn't really sort of publicly available knowledge. So we do encourage y'all to that we do have a network of consultants and fiber brokers that can kind of help once you have an area in mind. So please feel free to reach out on the Discord or email, and we can help you kind of source where that is. There's also some suggestions on our YouTube. Graham Castleton from Start Your Own ISP actually came to our very first Althea Palooza, and maybe after COVID we can have another Althea Palooza where we get everyone together and talk networking and have some classes. But Graham really gave a great 1 hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour talk about finding backhaul, looking for those pillars, looking for those clues essentially of where the heck the fiber is in your area. But that's definitely also something where we're happy to kind of help with that lift, and we have some experts on board to help you out with too. And then once you know that, then you can kind of move on to the next piece, and maybe Stephen, you can talk a little bit about your journey, or at least how it looked for you.
Yeah, sure. So let's see. I think probably the first thing we did was just make flyers, and it was just a simple, one-page little thing that I just made on my computer. It wasn't fancy at all, and just started posting them around, handing them out, that kind of thing. We did do some door-to-door, and I think my kind of feedback on that, after having done quite a bit of it, is that in a denser, like kind of a suburban type of neighborhood, door-to-door works really well. It's efficient, and people are generally happy to talk to you about it. In rural areas, I found it doesn't work that well. The houses are just too far spaced out. So kind of as I learned that lesson, then I started also doing postcards. And again, I went pretty cheap on it. I bought my own little postcards. I printed them out at home, and I mailed them out with postcard stamps. So I mean, the whole thing cost me maybe $50. It wasn't much. And and the other thing with postcards is I mailed them specifically to the addresses that I wanted to reach, because in the U.S. at least, you can pay the postal service to mail postcards to every single address in a county, and that's really not helpful for you at all. It's just way too many. So the way I found those addresses is I would open up the county web maps. So in the U.S., basically every property owner, their name and their address is public domain. And so you can go into whatever your county is, look at the web maps, and you should be able to find the actual mailing address of everybody that you would want to reach. Now, of course, that may be different in other countries. I don't know how it works everywhere. But I think that was a pretty key thing that I did. Now, in terms of like what was the actual uptake from all these various outreach things, it wasn't incredible. It wasn't like there's a huge influx from all these things. Each little thing kind of helps, and I definitely got feedback from a lot of people that like they appreciated getting the flyer or getting the postcard, so they had kind of a soft introduction to the whole idea, or at least the name Althea, and then had their own time to look into it a bit. And then by the time I was actually talking to them in person, they had a little bit of background, right, about who I was and what the project was we were trying to do. And so I think even if you don't get a lot of like immediate response from some sort of like literature like that, I think it's still helpful for a lot of people. So then, of course, the absolutely most effective thing I've said is the word of mouth. Just neighbors talking to neighbors, or you talking to your neighbors. So that's definitely the place. I mean, if it's feasible for you, like I definitely recommend starting where you live, because I was able to go and do all of these kind of installs and this troubleshooting and all that, and my commute time between this house and this other house is 5 minutes or something. It saves so much time. Now that I'm working on these other networks and the commute time is a lot more significant, like I can see it would just be really hard to start if you had to do that every single time, right? So that's kind of my initial advice is, like, in order to start to get your first handful of people online, try to just start with your neighbors and the people that and you're going to have a much easier time talking to them if they're already familiar with you, and you're going to be able to be more efficient about troubleshooting things when things start.
Yeah, Stephen, I think your network's also a really great example of the distributed CapEx that's possible as well. I mean, a lot of folks know like how much capital, or ask how much capital is needed for these networks. How do you bootstrap that? I mean, certainly there's a lot of grant money, flowing right now, and some folks, maybe would try to take out like a traditional type of business loan or something like that. But I think the model, particularly in your kind of demographic, was really kind of exciting, because there really wasn't a large outlay of CapEx, or it wasn't all done by yourself. It really was like this kind of distributed model. And I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about what that looked like.
Yeah, definitely. So I think my network was very affordable to start. So the biggest kind of CapEx for me personally was just building the gateway. And all told, because I had to build a whole mast, like 30-foot mast, to get some height and that kind of stuff. So all told, to build the whole gateway, I think I spent around $3,000, which is it's of course it's all relative, like how much an amount of money is to you, but it's just not that much. Like, I've started multiple other businesses and spent way more than that for businesses that ultimately didn't go anywhere, right? And so it's very affordable, especially compared to any sort of traditional way of starting an ISP. And the in terms of, like I said, getting to that break even of not just bleeding money every month, that was about 2.5 months in my case, which again is extremely fast and like extremely reasonable for this kind of thing. And then what I found has worked really well is to have a couple of what I call major relays, like right off the gateway, so people that are one hop deep in the network. And I was, I think, lucky in finding a small handful of people, both individuals and businesses, that were willing to be that major gateway or major relay. I mean, and they were willing to, put up their own, their own money to help build their aspect of that. And so usually that would be somewhere in the range of $350 to $500 is what they would spend. And also, since it's their own private property, they're able to use their own resources. Like one guy had his own little excavator, and he dug all the stuff to do the trenching, and he did some of his own electrical too, because he knew how to do that, and he can do that. So like there's things like that just save so much money, And when you do that, when you kind of find somebody who has this particular tool or this ability or whatever, and then you say, well, that comes up again, and like, oh, well, we need to go dig a trench over here. Maybe this guy will be willing to come help us, and people just will. Like, it's a community project, so people are happy to help each other with that kind of thing. They like knowing that, they are earning money, but they're also helping their community. They're helping other people in the community save money, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Actually, and I don't think it's unusual. Like it is sort of this like surprising thing. You wouldn't necessarily think that people would be, excited about using the excavator or building all this, networking equipment. But I think oftentimes, the reason, people just don't ask. But the opportunity to earn some revenue, to get great internet, and to then be part of this larger community project is I have seen over and over again in communities in all shapes and sizes that people do rise to this occasion and are ecstatic about it.
Yeah, when you find someone who owns something like an excavator or some specialty tool or something, they are thrilled to have a chance to use it. They've been dying to find opportunities to use this particular metal punch or whatever, So
yes, this is a universal truth. Like, we all want to just play with our big toys. Yeah, and just kind of another quick figure too is that typically we figure it looks like about $5 per downstream user of a relay of income per month. So if you have a relay that's got maybe 10 people downstream, they're maybe making $50 to $60 or something like that of revenue, either to offset their own usage or to earn some income. So to kind of give you an idea about what that looks like in the real life. I have some other like interesting questions here. I think that are actually really kind of great questions. They ask if users have the option to purchase like a gig for $10 a month from an incumbent provider, can you penetrate the market? How much does success depend on the price per megabit per second metric? Or are there other value propositions such as privacy, ownership models, payment flexibility, free tier guarantees, etc.? So I think that's a really, really great question, because it really does speak to market viability. And if you do have someone giving you a gigabit per second for $10 a month, it is not a viable market to come in as a competitor. It ultimately is a cost and quality metric. Now, it isn't binary where there aren't other metrics to compete with, but if you can't be competitive on cost and quality, I do not think that you're in a viable market for to bring in an Althea network. Certainly people are excited about the privacy aspect. They're excited about the ownership model, community. Payment flexibility is huge in certain markets. However, it still does come down to those two core pain points. So you need to be competitive on quality and cost. So yes, at the end of the day, that is core.
But remember, competitive on quality does not always mean that it's a pure numbers game. So
yeah.
take, for example, Yeah. So take for example, actually a lot of Deborah's customers have access to like 300 down, 15 up cable. Um, and this is coax, so in theory, this should be a much better connection than we can possibly offer with a $200 antenna. You know, they actually have copper to the house, they have fiber to the copper. How do you screw it up? And the answer is they do screw it up, which is the really remarkable thing. Um, so, uh, so what happens is that because there's only a few megabits of upload, if any one person on the street starts uploading to Dropbox, you can't have a video call. So there are lots of people with connections like that. And then we were also hooking up some people nearby in Westport, and they had 5 megabits per second DSL. We came into that market thinking, wow, 5 megabits per second DSL, that's horrible, we're going to blow them out of the water. But all the users were actually getting 1 megabit per second. You're like, well, what's the problem? Well, the answer was the ISP was providing routers that only did 2.4 gigahertz and only did it on channel 1. So they were all interfering with each other, and there's just massive interference disaster. So the speed of the DSL, in fact, did not matter at all in that scenario. Um, and what we were providing was better service by way of, looking at more factors. And part of this question is like, what is the value proposition of Althea? And the value proposition of Althea is a more integrated system for all of this. So something I'm working on for operator tools will tell you about Wi-Fi interference, and it'll say, hey, this customer is getting Wi-Fi interference to their devices, and you should fix that. And likewise, we have solutions for the upload speed problem that the cable networks face. Once again, because we own the software on the endpoint routers, we can run traffic prioritization software that says, hey, this big Dropbox upload, it's not that important. And so the relay will say, hey, we got this person there on a video call. We're going to put that video call ahead of the Dropbox upload. And whenever there's empty connection space, we're going to shove as much of the Dropbox upload in as we can find. So it provides a better, smoother experience, despite the numbers not necessarily being as big. And speaking of numbers, I do want to wrap this up. If you have 1,000 megabits per second, if you have a gigabit to your home, that is about 5%, somewhere between 3 and 5% of American households, depending on what number you're looking at. The median American household has an internet speed of 70 megabits per second. So Althea is offering 150, 100 on the low end these days. We've been moving up. In the 200s, we're looking for Althea fiber to go faster. So, yeah, if you just buy any old thing off the shelf and hook it up in the Althea system, you're going to see better performance than the median U.S. internet speed. And also, that's the median U.S. internet speed to the home. I suspect that the median U.S. internet speed to the handset, to the device over Wi-Fi is much poorer because of poor Wi-Fi management by existing systems. So, Althea as an integrated system wants to tackle all of that. Yeah, I think that's everything.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I think I'm really glad you brought that up, because I do think the sort of like metric of whatever the speed test is a very sort of wishy-washy or nuanced number. And it's highly gamified, right? So ISPs typically run their own speed test servers, and prioritize that traffic. So the rest of your actual experience in traffic could be actually experienced much slower than the speeds that are that you're seeing on the speed test. And there's other sorts of latency and jitter and queuing and traffic prioritization that goes into your overall experience. So, you can get 50 megabits per second on a speed test, and that it really doesn't tell you a whole lot about what your actual experience might be on a video call or playing like a video game or something like that. So it is a really important point. Okay, so I think that sort of leads into this kind of, next couple of questions is basically like, Avery here asks, what are the operator tool enhancements, the Gravity Bridge, new router softwares and features and future roadmap? And then they also ask, I would love an overview of the project and exciting things on the horizon. So, you know, better yet, take a drink of water, Justin, and tell us what's cool going to happen.
Okay, so
Mike, flip your mic down.
Can you hear me okay? You should be able to hear me okay.
Just flip your mic down.
I'm actually using this thing. So,
oh, sorry. Okay.
but the issue is that the gain is on it is really low, and so after the last set of comments, I boosted the gain by 2 or 3 decibels, so it should be better now. How is it? Okay, so then so yeah, there's sort of a lot of stuff to talk about here. First of all, operator tools enhancements. The next step here is that I'm going to be adding a deposit page for users. So they're going to go to some URL which doesn't exist yet. I'm going to say wallet.althea.net, which won't take you anywhere right now, by the way. And when they go there, you'll be able to put in your phone number. It'll send you a text message. It'll look up your router or all the routers with your phone number in them. And it'll let you just go and deposit it right there. So right now, one of the bigger friction points we have is that users, they get they're like, oh, my router needs more funds, and they need to be home, and they need to then log into their router at their house before they can deposit money. So we're going to solve that problem and really start pulling some of the user dashboard features sort of into a remotely accessible form. So you can go to wallet.althea.net and see like your usage, and do a list of things that I have not completely listed out yet, because I'm sort of going to start with deposits and expand it from there. So I'm working on the framework. I want that done before the end of February, hopefully sooner. Now, other things that, so there's also Gravity Bridge, Althea blockchain. I've made that pitch already. New router software features. So right now, our latest firmware is mostly bug fixes. I have another firmware out the door with more. I have another firmware on my computer with incremental improvements that I'm going to release in a few weeks. And what I'm really sort of excited about in the short to medium term is Althea for fiber and Althea for LTE hardware. Specifically, I'm going to be working on new Althea router models that work well with fiber, and can let us push multiple gigabits for our Althea fiber network. We're thinking about a 10 gigabit trunk to relays for like the scale we hope to work on. And I'm really excited about that. It's going to be fun. And I also think that we can keep the hardware cost. What's interesting is that I think that with the right hardware, we can keep the cost for a 10 gigabit fiber relay to about the same as an Alfia relay. So $500, $800, like Steven was talking about before, you can keep that about the same. You can keep the cost for a endpoint is going to go from $200 to $300, and you can get a gigabit endpoint, not a 10 gigabit endpoint, sadly. Couldn't make that work out. But I'm really excited about that, and I'm really excited to get a chance to play around with it.
Yeah, and you'll own the fiber though, which is amazing. I mean, your ISP right now, they don't pay you. You can't hang an LTE antenna on the side of your house and earn revenue. These things are not currently possible legacy models. So very, very excited to see this full stack of Althea, to the data center, to the middle mile, to the last mile fiber, to fixed wireless and LTE, down to the very device level at the end. Amazing.
So that's I mean, if you want to take 3 or 4 steps backwards, the really exciting thing about Althea is that for decades, sort of networking was invented, computer networking was invented. And for a long time, it was about throwing packets as fast as you could, and CPUs just weren't fast enough. And then, smartphones came into existence, and suddenly everybody wanted the fastest, smallest CPU they could possibly find. Now we're at the point where internet speed is growing slower than CPU speed. So that's why if you go into these big networking forums, if you talk to the engineers at Verizon, at AT&T, it's all about network virtualization. It's all about, oh hey, we can take all these appliances and we can put them in software and we can virtualize them on these servers. And Althea is sort of the continuation of that to the edges, because what they haven't considered is that this fundamental change, this fundamental flip in what devices can do, is going to change the way internet is bought and sold. I mean, whether that's Alfia or somebody else is perhaps still up for debate, but the way internet is bought and sold will change, just like the way all networking changed in the past 4 or 5 years. And that's going to be decided pretty soon. And that's sort of why Althea is cheaper, more flexible. It's why Stephen can go out and pay $3,000 to beat out to like completely build over a like other wireless ISPs that spent $100,000 on a giant tower.
Ask Stephen how close the CenturyLink headquarters is, like the data center there.
I literally shoot a radio link over the building. Like it's across the street from my gateway. I haven't thrown rocks at it yet, but
yeah. So they have this big ball and chain of this old-fashioned, low-powered hardware from the pre-software routing days sitting out in the field, and there's been a enormous revolution in the meantime that almost nobody's really noticed because networking is under the hood. And this is where Althea really shines. It's why we get our enormous cost improvements. It's how we provide better service despite being on a worse transmission medium. And it's sort of what I want to take to fiber. It's what I want to take to phones and really push things beyond and sort of, see how far it can go.
And I'm also I'm getting lots of great comments about a video for an online interactive demo of the dashboard, and definitely we'll get that out. Stephen and I will work on that here over the next week or so, and hopefully sooner. And also get y'all like an interactive demo of what the operator tools look like. However, if you want that sooner, go to althea.net/firmware, grab a router, and you can see the dashboard, or buy.althea.net and experience the fun for yourself.
Yeah, you can also run it off just any old computer you have laying around. If you have, some old desktop or something.
It's true. That old Dell Optiplex in the corner can have a new life as an Althea router. Actually, you need an add-in card for that as well, though. We have some questions here. Has the millimeter wave AP hat caught your attention yet? So we actually do run the 60 gigahertz in our Tacoma network, which is delivering a few hundred megabits per second to the home there. And have also throughout the network in Oregon, we have 60 gigahertz to a lot of our relays, actually. And we're about ready to put in the Ubiquiti Airfiber 60 LR. Oregon, we have 4 relays and really try that out. And so far, we've been pretty happy with using these things. They are not a one-size-fit-all solution. They are still a short distance hop, and one that is susceptible to like rain fade. But as long as you are very much within the specs, like if it's a 1 kilometer radio, you probably want to leave that within a half kilometer, 3/4 kilometer in heavily rained environments to give yourself a lot of cushion there. But yeah, we use them. They work great. Get a couple hundred megabits per second out of radio, and excited to see more of that. We have some partners that have some Terragraph equipment on the way, so also excited to maybe implement Althea in the Cambium Terragraph 60 gigahertz equipment as well. We have any final questions before we wrap it up? All right. Well, we'll put all the links in the chat as well. Please join us on Discord. The wizard, Justin Kilpatrick, will be there to answer all of your questions and help you once you have hacked the Althea box and now are trying to fix it. And I will be there as well to help you deploy networks and get started on that journey. So really excited to see everyone in the field, and we'll be keeping in touch. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.